Have a good meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the December 7th Finance and Audit Committee agenda meeting at 3:05. I'm going to read a statement of announcement. The meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the December 7th, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee meeting was distributed on December 3rd, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance. So I'd like to get a motion to adopt the agenda.
So
Get a second?
Second.
Okay, agenda is approved as written. The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the November 2nd, 2020 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
You, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Carrie. Minutes are approved as written. The next item on the agenda is to discuss directives referred to the committee, and Chris is going to lead into this discussion.
Yes, so I did not intend to go over each of these individually, but yet talk about them as a group. With the current structure that we have related to the policy committee, they have referred these 4 directives to us at this time. There were a couple others on a prior meeting that were mentioned, but I wanted to let you know that staff are in the process of reviewing these. And once we get these reviewed and have our recommended draft changes, we will share those with the committee members, get feedback from you, and then turn around and do public comment. I did speak with Robin a little bit prior to this meeting to validate how we wanted to handle this. Under the Chief CFO agenda item, I'm going to talk about 800-07 CP, which is the Finance and Audit Committee procedures. I want to speak to that briefly, but we are in the process of trying to capture this flow of directives in that document. And after talking to Susan this morning as well, we feel like that's the best course of action. That way the committee has a chance to look over what we're thinking we want to do prior to it going out for public comment. So at this time, we are actually working on A and B. C and D are a little bit further out, and we will begin work. Well, we've actually started on C as well, but not substantially. So just want to let you guys know that those are in process, and you'll start receiving these here soon from us for your review. And I just wanted to find out if the committee had any questions or any disagreements in regards to that being our process.
Chris, I thought that the process sounded good that we talked about. So if anyone have any questions for Chris on the 4 directives listed under item 5 on the agenda? All right. So
I don't have any at this time.
okay. So Chris, we'll just stay tuned for next steps on these particular directives. Since I know you said you're working on some in the short term and a few later. So we can move on to item 6 if you like.
Sure. We'll have probably 3 or 4 of the directives out of this group or prior groups for your January agenda that will actually be ready for committee review. And as a result, sometime between now and then, we need to get with you all those suggestions. Probably this week, I've got a meeting set up with Pat and Mary to review our proposals. And so I guess in the next week, we'll be able to share those with you. And then we'll go to public comment and have them on the agenda for January. Okay? All right.
Good.
Item 6, I just wanted to make everyone aware that at our request in finance and management, we have requested that 4 additional policies be added to our agenda for review this year. So the policy committee has not taken this up yet to determine they're going to agree to put these on their agenda. I do anticipate they'll agree and turn around and send these back to us as a committee for staff review. Those 4 items are the 2 audit directives, which we review annually. Item C is the funding for services, which outlines all the capitated funding rules and speaks directly to bands B and I, which we are eliminating. So that directive needs substantial review and update. And then 60401 DD is on individual clothing and personal property, and that is an externally facing directive. We are already tasked with reviewing the sister directive for that, which is internally facing. And there are some nuances, so I would like to try to consider consolidating these or otherwise reducing some of these directives that relate to consumer funds and property. But at this time, it didn't make any sense to take up the other one that's virtually identical and not look at this one. And we're also looking at the management of funds for individuals participating in community residential programs, 212 DD already. And so again, it didn't make a lot of sense to not have this one out there as well. So we'll be sending these to the policy committee in January for their consideration.
Okay. Okay. So I would ask Chris that with each policy or directive that we need to review before action needs to be, the next step needs to be taken, whether that's send out for public review or it's maybe just move to commission meeting would be the next step for some of them possibly. But depending on, you know, what the next step would be, I would ask that this committee, you know, receive the directive to review and have a minimum of 3 days to review it before we have to share our input or hit a deadline.
Sure. And when we share those, what we'll do, I'll get with Susan in her area. What I would find useful if I were in your shoes is a marked up version that shows all the proposed changes as well as a clean version.
Yeah.
With those changes fully implemented so you can clearly read what it's going to say if you accept the changes.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of this?
I'm in agreement with what you just stated.
Okay, great. All right. If there's nothing further on these proposed directives, then, and Chris, if you don't have anything else to add, then I guess we can move on to item number 7.
All right.
Information regarding next steps for the at-home bands,
Okay.
B's and I's fee-for-service implementation plan.
Sure thing. All right. This will be a team effort. Mary's in here to discuss a portion of this, and Pat's online in case there are additional questions that I can't answer. But I did want to kind of give you an update on where we are. We immediately scheduled, after the commission meeting took the vote, we immediately set up a meeting with providers on December 1st. We took our already scheduled statewide finance meeting and repurposed it, and only invited DSN financial managers and their day staff and residential staff, their residential staff and finance directors to that meeting. It was well attended. I think we had over 70 folks attend that meeting. I'm giving you a copy, and we will go over the presentation that we did with them to kind of explain our approach, and I'll go over that with you as well here in a minute after I go through some high-level points. We also took questions in that meeting. There were several that we were able to answer. Nothing that was, earth-shattering. So we were able to resolve the questions in the meeting. I wanted to basically raise your awareness that it's kind of due to the timing of the flip to fee-for-service being mid-fiscal year 1/1 and our retro payment of bands for day and ICF being back to July 1st. The chart that I'm going to go over in a little bit indicates basically a fiscal year 2021 impact versus a fiscal year 2022 and beyond impact, because fiscal 21 is kind of a nuanced year in that the impact of the revenue being retroactive is annual, but the cut and reduction in funding is only for half the year. We did a financial assessment of all the providers immediately, which we had already done, but did it at a deeper level. We identified that 9 boards had less than 1.5 months cash and were projected to lose funds under the flip. And when we define losing money, that is on the annual review part, not the 6-month fiscal 21 impact, because if we want to look at which boards are going to need our help, they may be okay over the next 6 months, but we really need to worry about them long term. So when we're looking at the loss that we're comparing to as compared to their cash and came up with the 9, that's in comparison to the annual impact. 3 of those 9 are actually greater than 1 month. So, I mean, one could argue whether 1.5 months is the right number to use or not, but 3 of the 9 have more than 1 month in cash. These are based on fiscal year 19 audited numbers, by the way. Let's see. Looking at our current first quarter report that providers have submitted, only 3 of the 9 are losing money in the first quarter, July to September. Of the 9 boards that are in high-risk area, we have already analyzed, or in the process of analyzing, 4 of those 9. 3 of those we've already done extensive fiscal recommendations and implementations, and their cash is low because they're still turning their operations around. And then the one other we were already in the process of reviewing this particular board because they concerned us before this even happened. So that leaves only 5 really new agencies that are really, really high risk. We identified another 10 boards that are losing money annually projected and have over a month and a half in revenue. So even though they have a month and a half in revenue, let's just say, for argument's sake, they have sufficient cash. Let's say they're projected to lose $500,000 a year. It won't take many years for them to get to where they don't have over 1.5 months. So we've got to look at that group as well. They're high risk, but they're not ultra high risk. So when we get into our plan that I'm going to go over here in a minute, you'll see how we're kind of segregating these providers into our approach. 6 of the 9 boards are actually making money right now with less than that have 1.5 less months of cash, and some of it's substantial. I've got the quarterly report here on my computer if we need to delve into any of it. Basically, as a provider group, they are reporting $4.5 million in surpluses for the first quarter, and cash is at $80 million. Now, I know when you keep in mind the cash, keep in mind there could still be some PPP funds in there. I think some boards have done really well at taking that out. Also, keep in mind that we pay them half a month in advance. So, if you factor in that $20 million of that maybe is prepaid revenue, if you will. Anytime you look at cash mid-year, you have that risk of over over assessing where their cash position is because we pay in advance. Now, as we flip to fee for service, it'll be retroactive after the service is rendered. And, at this point, it's only 2 of the 9 or 10 bands we have. So it's not the largest portion of the revenue flipping to retrospective. Let's see. Another question to ask, if the 4.5, I know for a fact some of these boards are projecting the recoupment for the band B&I that the commission has approved. I know that for a fact because I've spoken with many of these boards, probably 10 of them, on how to record that and how to estimate it. So these numbers for quite a few of these providers even include them projecting that loss. I don't know if they're also adding back the factor that we're going to pay them fee for service back to July 1. If you'll keep in mind, the commission approved a 60% recoupment and then a fee for service for every single unit of at-home day service delivered back to July. So we're still working on that math, but that number's not nearly as severe as what we did in May. In May, it was $1.8 million per month. It's going to be significantly south of that when you consider, even though we went up to 60%, the fact that we're paying back fee for service really makes that number drop significantly. Now, one problem is you've got a variety of boards out there that still haven't reopened day services. So they're going to get hit pretty hard still, but those that have reopened, which was our goal, are going to benefit from that fee for service. Okay, so if you'll look at, I emailed you, and Mr. Miller, you should have this in your packet. If you will look at the financial manager's fee for service implementation plan, this is exactly what was presented to the providers. If you'll look on the second slide with the table, again, what we've done is if you look at the far right cash reserve analysis, the first thing I did is I highlighted in red, which of course this is in black and white. Yours might be in red. I can't remember if I sent you color or not. But anyways, if you look at the far right column, this is the cash position. Again, fiscal year 2019 audited numbers of those that were under a month and a half cash based on fiscal 19 expenses. Then if you cross-reference that to the people that are going to lose money on an annual basis, that is the other highlight. So that's the 9 boards. So if you take that information, now let's go over. If you look over, I've got option 1, 2 different versions presented to you. One is the fiscal 2021 impact, and one is the fiscal year 22 and go forward impact. If you notice, under option 1, we are having the gap funds that they're losing are only for 6 months. So that'd be January to June. So instead of the big $10 million number, we're talking about 5.2. The revenue numbers are identical because it's back retroactive to July. So $5.6 million being paid and $700,000 being paid for those 2 rate increases. So actually, with that 6.3 being paid out, the providers are going to see an increase in cash or revenue of $1.166 million. Now, keep in mind, this is all estimates. Fiscal year 20 and 21 can look significantly different. We haven't had the ability to analyze that reliably, but using static, consistent numbers, fiscal 21, you can see, in fiscal 22, they're going to lose $4 million. If you flip over to what was presented to you, which are the next 3 columns, they're projected to lose $4 million as a group. Now, keep in mind, there's some netting in there. So there's I don't know if, Pat, you have those numbers in your head. I know $5 million lost and maybe over $1 million gained. I can't remember how that breaks down. But you got to dig in there because not everybody's getting an equal share of surplus or deficit. Each board is impacted differently. So if you look at fiscal 2021, you're looking at a significantly different fiscal picture, which gives us a little bit of time and wiggle room for the next 6 months. Not that we can sit around and rest on our laurels, but it does give us a little bit of breathing room so that it's not so severe right out the gate. Are there any questions on that chart before I go forward and talk about our strategy? All right, if you'll go ahead.
Chris, I was just gonna, the last part you were talking about with some of the numbers and stuff, where is that exactly on the chart? Was I supposed to be looking at option 1, fiscal year 2021 impact, or fiscal go forward when you,
Right.
that last statement that you made?
Yes, option 1. Okay, so I took option 1 and broke it into two computations. The first 2, 4, 5 columns are the impact for fiscal year 21. If you go all the way to the bottom of that column, you'll see a 1,166,710. So that's the net impact on the provider network. Now, if you look up above, you'll see there's still some pretty significant negatives up there when you see how it's impacting boards and specifically. If you look at the next 3 columns, these are the exact numbers you were presented at the commission meeting,
Okay.
which is the normal year, that if we had a 12-month loss of revenue and a 12-month retro revenue payment. Okay?
Okay, got it.
Any other questions?
Chris, the counties are listed number 2 through 49, or the providers are listed number 2 through 49. Is there a number 1 that's supposed to be on here, just out of curiosity, or?
No, ma'am. We used when we did the fee-for-service flip for case management years ago, everybody that did case management got a provider number, and we just, instead of creating new ones, we just use the same ones they've always been accustomed to using.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, do we have a list of those so that we can know who these providers are somewhere?
Nope. I can email it to you right now, though, if you would like to look at it in the meeting.
I dropped you an email to that effect, but I just would like to know that. Thank you.
All right. So I'll email it to you when Mary starts talking. So when we started looking at this, we jumped right in. I sent you a document that was an agenda. We started having a lot of more internal meetings now that we kind of had a clear path forward. And I can discuss that implementation plan separately, which I sent in an email a little bit before this meeting. But staying on topic in regards to this presentation, we have always said, and Mary's always been in the opinion, and I agree with her, that we don't need to muddy the water. When we're talking about waiver services, we don't need to muddy the water with ICFs in there because they're so unique. She calls it the sandals resort of residential placement for DDSN because it's all inclusive. And so we know the ICF rates need some work, and we're going to be working with HHS on that, but we feel like that's a separate issue that needs its own attention and its own strategy. So the strategy that you're going to be hearing about going forward is related to all the waiver placements. And so we're talking strictly CTH2 and CRCF residential placements when we get into the rest of this, when we start talking about acuity. Not that we don't care about the others, it's just a whole separate issue. All right, if you look on page 4, this is just kind of a high level of what I've already told you. We did a risk assessment. We identified providers with low cash reserves, which was 9. Those with the negative impact that had over a month and a half cash was 10. So those are not inclusive of one another. That's 19 total boards. Those with low cash reserves and a projected annualized negative impact from implementation of fee-for-service will receive our highest priority and will go into a phase 1 implementation, which I will go over in a minute. Others with projected significant annualized negative impact. So in other words, let's say we have a board that their projected negative impact is $1,000. We don't need to lump them in. They're not really high priority. They have over a month and a half cash, and they're only losing $1,000. We don't need to spend a lot of time right out the gate. Not that we're going to ignore those providers, but they don't need our first attention. So that the phase 2 will be Of those 10 boards, how many of them have a significant annualized negative impact from implementation? Okay. And I didn't write a number down for that. I think it's maybe like 6 or 7 of those 10. All right. If you go to page 5, all providers, and that when I say all, I mean all DSN boards will have an acuity review completed and will be giving equal treatment regardless of their cash position or anything else when we go through this process. And Mary will talk about the acuity process. It's something she's been talking about for a long time, and it really is desperately needed to better align our funding with the needs of the folks that are being served. Under phase 1, 9 providers will be the first reviewed. They'll be prioritized. So we'll get there, we'll hurry theirs through and review the acuity of individuals served and have a mandatory operational and fiscal review completed. As I stated, 4 of those 9 we've already done that for, or 1 we're in the process of. So another 5 we've got to get going. Folks in phase 2, 10 providers. Again, some of these are losing less than $100,000 a year, so it's a little bit less than 10. Will be the next batch reviewed for acuity level of individuals served, and an operational fiscal review we are proposing to be elective because, again, some of these boards, they may be sitting on $5 million, and they don't need our help. They've got it figured out. They have confidence that they can handle it themselves. So we weren't going to make that mandatory. It doesn't seem to fit really when you look at the boards in specifics, which I know you don't have that list, but I can get it to you. Criteria are being established related to DSN's willingness to advance funds to providers with inadequate cash reserves. Again, we're not going to, this is going to be very formal. It's not going to be, you just ask for money and we give it to you. There's going to have to be a cash flow projection as well as some other things that will be required, as well as a formal promissory note that we will have in place outlining repayment requirements. And again, when it comes to repayment, if our goal is to maintain the health of our providers, we don't need to set up a repayment plan that keeps them cash strapped where they can't function. So we'll be coming to the commission with our recommendations here, but I think we may have a variety of repayment recommendations when we get to that point. All right, now we're getting ready to go into Mary's area. I'm going to stop and see if you have questions in regards to what I've gone over, and then Mary's going to talk about the process that we're going to go through for every single CTH2 and CRCF consumer served in the DSN provider network. Does anyone have any questions up to this point?
I just want to say that I don't have any questions right now, but a lot of this was sprung on us just recently, as you know, Chris, and I haven't had a chance to go over much of it, so I'm doing the best I can for right now. But as of now, I don't have any questions, but I may, because like I say, I have not had a chance to go over this like I wanted to at all, because it was sprung on us very shortly ago, just very short time ago. So just to let you know that.
Yeah, it's an 8-page presentation, and I was trying to figure out. We had a meeting with Medicaid this morning, and I had another meeting as soon as I got back here, so I was trying to figure out if I had anything I could send you at all that I might have handy, because I hadn't had time to develop anything, so I apologize for that.
It's okay, but I'm just saying that I honestly don't know what I have right now, because I've got another letter to read and I got this to go over. But anyway, I will at another point. This is really we're not finalizing something today anyway, so it's okay.
All right. So Mary, anybody else have any questions before Mary jumps in?
All right, we're just telling you how we're operationalizing the decision that was made at the commission meeting a couple weeks ago. So we have to get into check acuity. There could be 2 reasons why a provider is utilizing gap money in their day-to-day operations, and one of them could be they have a little more overhead than they probably need to have, and we're checking that on one side. But the other side could be that the individuals they support over the course of time have greater needs than what they were originally funded at. So because by history, the bands were given to people either really basically based on where they came from, not so much as an assessment that was done for them. So if you were coming out of an institution, you were getting band H's automatically. If you were coming from home, you were getting band G's automatically. And so really it was more of an idea of if you were going into a larger facility, you needed an H. If you were going into a 4-bed, you needed a G. Kind of just the thought process was there for that.
And for new commissioners, the dollar, I think it's about $20,000 difference between the two bands, if you need to know what financial impact that is.
Okay.
$19,000.
And so the process is, and you can give me the outlier amount too when we get to that point. The process now that providers have, but actually don't have because we're not funding it and haven't been for years, is that you could request a change in band based on somebody's need. You can send in all the documentation and say, well, this person, came into me as a G band, which is $80,406, but I need them to be, they really have a lot more needs, and they need to be an H band. And you would send in a band change request, and I'll be perfect. I've sent a few of them in when I was a provider, and none of them got funded. I felt every single one of them was justified. The documentation was there, but because we had money in the bank and there was some gap money there between the bands, it was a capitated system, we were expected to take care of that person. Okay, so step one in our acuity review to get people where they need to be as we move forward down this process is to have an internal review of currently assigned bands for each one of the financial managers. And I'm not talking about all residential providers. I'm just talking about the financial managers who are going to be impacted by this, this option that we've taken to go fee for service. So they are going to be looking at all their H's and all their G's and saying, Susie's now, when she first got this G, she was 50 years old and in great health. And now it's 30 years later and she is not in such great health and she really is supported by us. We've maybe even moved her to where there's more staffing and she requires more trips to the doctor and all that stuff that requires more hands-on care. And so she legitimately is an H band. But you might have gotten somebody who came out of the institution years ago and is pretty easy peasy. I mean, can do a lot of stuff that they need to do. No medical issues, no behavioral issues, but they were historically given that band H, but they don't need it. So we're asking providers to swap those bands and give us the justification to do that. Now, more than likely, they're going to end up with a few more of the G's needing to go to H's, lower to higher, versus the other way. And in that case, we've got a process in step 2 that we will do a request for a band change for those kind of left out of. We've leveled our decks on our shed, our chairs on the sun deck. Everybody's good except for this group over here still needs nice chairs and they don't have it. So we're going to make sure they do by doing a verification process, and then those folks will be in step 2. So step 1 is just justification for band swapping. No new monies, just doing with what you got, move them around. And then we get into step 2.
The reason we're doing that is to position for residential fee for service.
Right, when we
and
get to
negotiating rates, right?
Right, because we got to put people where they need to be. And since we don't really have an assessment at this point, all we could really do is review acuity based on care needs in their plan, behavior support plans, medical documentation. So we're asking for all that information to be submitted. Basically, what you would submit for a band change back in the day. Any questions about
Very
phase
simplified, though.
Very simplified. And we will actually review them. There's another difference.
Yeah.
Because most of them kind of are. I've got 4 very large boxes in my office of previously requested outliers and band changes. So we have not been doing that. It's just one of those things that when there was no money, it just went over there and sat. So what we're trying to do is true up the system, get people where they need to be. So when we do go fee for service, they're ready. We're ready to march into that. And if a provider is providing more care for somebody and should be funded at that level, now that we don't have the capitated money sitting from the band Bs and Is, they're going to have to be funded at the correct level to support that person. In other words, you're wrapping the fee for that service around the individual, which is person-centered. Okay, any questions about phase one? I'm hoping to get that done in December. Okay.
Mary, who is going to be charged or part of doing the review, the acuity review process?
Well, we've got to get people who can actually understand what the charts say about somebody, can really read a behavior support plan, so I've got a couple of folks in our QA department that are doing it, and myself.
Okay.
I mean, that's our background, so you got to take folks that have this background to do it.
Similar with the fiscal, there's only 3 of us in this agency that really understand provider finances, so it'll be a team of 3 working on those assessments.
And if we need to reach out for more information, we can easily do that. This first phase is probably the easier of the phases. The next one is going to be request for a band change. So that means going up, justification for the band change, which means going from that G band lower funding to the higher funded band. So that is we just made a fillable form called request for a band change, increase to an H. They'll have to justify the band changes, and we've got a list of all the documentation that we're expecting, and a section for them to write out, why am I seeking this? What has changed? What is different? But it's to tell me what they are currently doing. Because if you're saying I'm using this additional money to support this person, that means you're already doing this stuff, and this is what it costs to do it. And those folks, we also are asking that the ED attest to this being factual and true. And if we need to do a site visit, we can also get that done. So I was just at a county doing that Friday, actually. So that is step 2, hoping to get that done in January.
Mary, how many people would you say, or how many individuals would you say will need to go through that process? 300, 1,000?
I have no idea, Robin. I really can't tell you because I have not opened all 4 of those boxes. I mean, I know how many that I was supporting that required it. It wasn't tons, but I probably could tell you that there was probably 5 or 6 people I can think off the top of my head at our board that I could justify a band H for.
So every provider will do a internal review and will only work with us on band change people. So let's say they have 80 folks and only 10 are a problem. They either have too much money and need to go back to a G, or they need to be bumped to an H, or in step 3, there's another option that she hadn't gotten to yet. So you're only talking about working on those limited folks at an agency. So we're not talking, every single residential consumer will be self-assessed at the board level, but not come to us necessarily.
If I may question, this is Commissioner Rawlinson. How many people did you say could review those 4 boxes at this point?
I'm just saying that they haven't been reviewed at all. We're going through it now, probably about 5 of us. And what we're going to do is just take that information and when people tell us they previously asked for an outlier, pull that information out and look at it all in total.
And this is Kevin, I will say some of those, because I probably have had half dozen boards, just like you're saying. I've got John, and he's a G, he's an H, he's an H. Well, then I got Sam, and then he's being funded as an H, but he's really a G. So that doesn't require anybody delving in here. They're just going to swap those, so it's a net neutral effect. But the reporting is accurate. It's sort of like, to me, okay, the cash register says I have $500 in cash and checks, but my cash and my checks aren't balancing. It says I have $300 in cash, and really have $300 in checks. It just makes for, it doesn't require any time on our part, but we have accurate reporting moving forward.
But when you know how to go through a file and you understand how a file's set up, it really is not, I mean, you can get through it. And then if we clear the decks in the beginning by getting those band swaps out, you're already knocking a few people that you would normally ask for a higher band for, but we've already given them the higher band by swapping that G and H. So we're trying to clean out a little bit before we really have to get into that heavy lift. And then if I'm, okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that when y'all do get into these boxes and figure out who needs to be switched, I would just like to know about how many people were switched which way and the other way, so we would have an idea, like Robin's saying, about it, whether it's about how many it was for each thing, just so we'd have an idea.
Okay, well, there's also a false sense of security saying that only the people that are in the box are in need of a change. Because, and I'm saying this from experience, when you get to the point where DDSN says we're not funding these anymore, or we're not doing these anymore, or because you have cash in the bank, I'm not going to even look at what you send me, you stop sending it. It doesn't mean that it's not necessary. So, especially when we go for fee for service, where you're not going to have that money in the system for them to move over from the band Bs and Is to support John anymore with the extra staff that he requires, you need to make sure that, you know, I didn't send them in. I sent in what I needed to keep the outliers that I had, but I didn't do any more work because it wasn't worth my time to do that. So I want to make sure we get everybody into this game. So it's not going to be limited to just the people in the box. Those are the people who have sent it in over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Isn't that how long those things have been down there, anybody? They've been down there a while, if not a little bit longer. So there might be more out there, because I know that on my credenza, when I left my office, there was a stack of names. I said, these people need band changes, these people need outliers, and these are the reasons why, but I am not going to bother with this because there was no reason to do the heavy lift when there was no reward on the end of it. So we, moving to fee for service, that money that was in the system to support them, and the reason DDSN was saying we're not going to fund these, you've got money in your system, is no longer there. So they have to be funded appropriately.
Hey, I'm sorry. My
more-
phone went out for a minute and I could not hear I asked a question and I couldn't hear anything for a few minutes. How many people have we got that can review them, Mary?
There's probably about 5 or 6 of us.
Okay, good. Okay, I just want to make sure you weren't going to be there by yourself trying to figure this out, and that you had some help.
We've been, we've got some knowledgeable. We just added a couple of folks to do some inventory work, so we can repurpose them for this.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. That's what I was just checking on.
Me, Kyla, 5, I think. I'm thinking it's 5.
Okay, good. Just make sure you got enough help, and if you don't, bring some people in if we need to.
Well, this is a very, very, very specific knowledge set. That's the issue.
Yeah.
And you also want to have a good, you need to have that feeling that when you're reviewing it on behalf of the providers, that they respect your skill level. So we want to make sure we have folks in here that are doing this and know how to ask the right question, and we'll verify each other's work.
Okay, very good.
Okay, and step 3 would be what would formally be the outlier request. When you get to when you're serving somebody and they're at this highest level of funding of Band H, and their expenses to care for them go beyond that, there was a process in place, I was going to say back in the day, that would fund people the money that they needed when it hit a certain number. Chris, what's that dollar amount? When their care reached, what's the outlier dollar amount for?
I don't know, I gave you the card.
Oh.
I have it memorized. 125,000.
Yeah, this is, okay. Yeah, if you reached $125,000 in expenses, you ended up, you can ask for an outlier to pay for that. But again, if you had money between those Band Bs and Is or money in the bank, you weren't getting funded. And frankly, I think they just ran out of cash for it because it was 100% state dollars. So at this point, one, we're probably going to have to look at our directive on outliers before we can move forward with this.
That's the 250-10 that.
That's right. That's why it's on there.
Yep.
And we are at that point, we're going to say that we're just going to have a funding level for people who require higher management than the previous H band. So it would just be in the rate. All this is being done in an effort to take all these state dollars that were being used to fund outliers and put them in a rate so we could get it matched, ultimately. But that's where we're going to need some HHS assistance on that lift, because we're going to have to individually rate levels of care. In other words, this is I'm using my hands to talk and they can't see me. You have, you need X number of dollars to have somebody that needs this X number of items like ADLs, behavior supports or whatever, but everything's in a discrete rate per acuity level, and that way it can be funded at that rate versus just adding state dollars to it, and we can't match the state dollars if they're not part of a rate. And we're just getting one rate. So there is a lot to do on that end of things, which is probably going to take a waiver amendment. So we're going to have to figure that one out to see if there's a way to increase our residential rate so we can pass that on to providers.
So are you saying we really can't do step 3 until we get a rate increase from HHS? Is that what you're saying or not?
We've got to look at what our finances look like, but we're going to have to support people with what they need. We can't just tell a provider, well, go figure it out. We're going to have to either negotiate a higher rate on what we receive from HHS or, dip into our funds to fund it. But it's going to have to be, you can't go fee for service on everything else and take away that capitated model and not support the individuals with what they need. So we've got 2 things that we have to do for step 3, besides get the outlier requests. 1, we have to change the directive. And then 2, we're going to have to look at that rate and talk to HHS about how that we get that funded. But that is our last step, and we are currently in that process now of doing those 2 other items that have to be done.
So at the end of the day, it'll all be wrapped into that fee for service.
No, it will be wrapped in, I like to say wrapped around the individual and what they need. And it would be fee for their service. Yes.
Well, it'll be, just to be clear, the residential folks will remain in a band still. We'll still be paying that prospectively and not based on actual units of service. But we've got to get there on that service side also.
Yep.
So we're basically doing pre-planning and knowing it's coming. And so, yes, the funding will be wrapped around the person, be individualized, but the way we pay it will
still be in that band. But we have to, the other thing is we have to prep this, because as we move down the field, we know we're going to this fee for service, but we've got a lot of people already in the system. If we don't get them trued up to where they need to be, when it comes time to do that fee for service based on acuity needs, we will have to be running around doing 5,000 assessments for everybody. And then, Commissioner Rawlinson, that's when it becomes a manpower issue. We should be ready to go so we can move people where they are. We know what the funding is. It'll help us budget, and it'll also help us build our rates.
So basically what you're doing right now, you analyze it, and then putting things in its proper places before we actually shoot the gun and say, we're running full speed.
Right. But if I'm looking at Board A, okay, and they have $500,000 in gap funds that we are technically pulling back. But as I analyze their B's and H's, I find that they're underfunded in their actual care of their individual to the tune of $250,000. That needs to go back into their funding. And it will via the band system. They would be bumped from G's to H's, so the money would go in there, okay? That is not a loan. That is true acuity, looking at the needs of the individuals.
Well,
Now-
also directly compliant with how the system was set up.
That's right.
At the outset. What happened is DDSN lost its way and did not have revenue. And over the last 10 years, just let things go, and we have been playing by our rules that are out there, that have been out there for 30 years, 25 years. So
I'm also, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are going to be some situations where you're gonna have to go to DHHS and say, hey, we can't fix this, tell us how.
Two things. We're working with them on the ICF rate right now. That needs to be fixed. And the other thing is working with them to build the residential rates where they need to be. But we might have to have a time period where it's like we're investing prior to receiving that, those monies.
and that'd be monies we're already, right today are investing, but come January 1, won't.
Right.
Because we've changed the system.
Right. Those monies were already out there doing this.
So it could be 6 months or a year before we can kind of get the machine well oiled, that it will run properly.
It depends on what the requirement is going to be. If the requirement is a waiver change or a waiver amendment, it takes a little bit longer. If we can stand to fund it for a little while until we do that, or if it means we get our rate bumped up a few dollars, then we'll be able to pull down more match.
Okay, we're starting on January
Yes.
1 with people service.
With band B, the band Bs and Is, the at-home Bs, not the residential bands.
But there are some unforeseen situations.
There
that
could
we will
be.
Probably.
There could be where maybe I can't switch. I mean, I've had boards that we had to work with before. They said, oh, it's an acuity issue. I'm going to send you band changes. And when they sent the band changes, we looked at them and said, these aren't justified. So I can't just go from G to H, which is the way DDSN used to do this. So we had to scooch up their payment a little bit, and they're the ones that might need a loan. Because it's not acuity based where the only reason I would give somebody more additional band money is if the acuity justified it.
So who would be responsible for a loan if a loan becomes necessary?
No. It'd probably be out of Chris's. We're working on the loan protocols now. There's got to be some protocols in place to get the loan.
Yeah, all these are separate legal entities, so they'll have a promissory note. I don't know if we'll get a UCC on it. We'll talk to our attorney right there, Mr. Lamel, and see what he, no, we have an in-house attorney we can ask. Whether we need to register it with UCC or anything like that.
Don't ever come to me with a UCC question. I haven't dealt with it since the bar exam, literally. So yeah, not my area, man.
So if someone doesn't pay, who's responsible for that debt? Does it come back to DDSN?
We'll be a creditor, and we will have the same risk that any other creditor will have, except we have a lot more leverage with these providers when it comes to reviewing their financial position, and we can hold up their payment. If we say, well, you're not paying us back, we'll take it right out of your check then. So I'm not really worried about that. I think if it's structured properly and we do a good acuity assessment and we look at their fiscal, since I've been here, we've done three fiscal reviews and completed them start to finish. With every single one of those, we can take those agencies from losing hundreds of thousands of dollars to making hundreds of thousands of dollars just with the suggestions we made related to operational inefficiencies, which is what I think Barry's concerned about, is are we paying for that type of waste or inefficient use of dollars, which I concur. We need to be very good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And that's why part of the review is a fiscal review. We're going to look at all their staffing, their workers' comp policy, their annual leave policy, their health insurance. I mean, we're going to look at it's pretty it's all inclusive.
It's all intrusive. That's a better word.
It is intrusive. Yeah, we look at everything.
Yeah. But that way we can tell there's a difference between supporting the individual and just supporting a program because it's always been that way. And you got to be, you know, and this sounds very simplistic, but one of the things that when I became an executive director, I had a board who was in trouble. One that would come in to ask the DDSN for money all the time. And when you look at it, it was not really monitoring change was basically their major problem. So that's going to work for some. In other words, I had people leave the agency, but I never changed the staffing. So if I had somebody who was very needy and they left the agency or moved to another home, the staffing in that house was never changed. Supervision and all that stuff never changed. So a legacy of that after 10 years leaves you with a lot of extra baggage that probably could be cleaned up. And we cleaned it up and got staffing right, got the hour creep that people would get when they made their own schedules, got that all cleaned up. When you had that cleaned up, you got back on the financial track. And it's very easy to fall into that because you're always worried about the next emergency when you're working with our folks. And so if you don't take a moment to step back, and usually the moment is, oh my God, I got a financial crisis. You have to step back and you have to look at this stuff. It can be done. Chris is an expert at it.
So January 1, we're ready to go.
Won't have him done, but he's ready to start.
Yeah, we're
Already started.
We're full steam ahead. I mean, we've got a strategy in place, and as you saw in the fiscal year 21 impact, the fact that we're going to retro revenue back to July, you factor that in and the timing, where it really hits the fan is July 1.
Right.
If we don't have everything fixed July 1, boards are really going to be, some of them are really going to be in trouble. So we've got to get, if they're owed funding, got to get them the funding they're owed. If they've got operational issues, we've got to identify them and fix it. And we got to do that immediately, like in January, December and January.
That's where I was trying to get to, Chris. There you go, man. Now you're talking. That's what I'm trying to get to.
All right, so that, I don't know if there's any other questions. I did, I guess in wrapping up, let you all know that we do continue to meet internally to ensure success. What we are going to have to do, you might want to attend some of these sessions. We're probably going to need to have, we're thinking right now, probably 3 different training sessions between now, some between now and December and some in January or early February, because part of fee-for-service, some of the issues that need to be conveyed to providers and have them advance knowledge of don't actually come into fruition until February when you're trying to run your bills and bill DDSN and so forth. So some things we need to go ahead and get meetings set up now in the next 2 to 3 weeks and possibly have multiple sessions for that one topic. And then others can wait till after the new year, because they're not as time sensitive. We've identified, we're meeting as a group and trying to identify those training objectives.
Okay, Chris, I just wanted to mention the second document you sent to us, the implementation plan. Do you want to go over anything regarding this additional piece
This is
sent to us before this meeting?
I'll be glad to take questions on it. Basically, this is where the rubber meets the road. We've been talking at a very high level about these things for months, probably 6 months. The issue is now that we know exactly what we're up against, there's a lot of things just to make sure, we don't want to have a staring contest and the ball go down the middle of the court and we both thought the other had it. So we are actually sitting down as a group communicating, yes, we've got that done. Yes, we've tested it. Yes, we've got to get a memo together. No, we've got to update the finance manual. No, we've got to update the directive. So none of this is new. All of this is nothing. When I aggregated this data this is the real live bullets, if you will. None of this is new to anyone. It's just making sure we have belly buttons assigned to every single process. And we have accountability, responsibility, and direct knowledge of who's doing what.
All right, thanks for that additional information regarding the process and the, SC kind of looked at the checklist, but thanks for sending that to us.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody have any other questions regarding this topic before we move to the CFO report? All right. So, Chris?
All right, just two things real quick. I referred to one of them already. Susan and I are working on 800-07 CP. That document has attachments that talk about how the committees function, and I finalized my recommendations prior to this meeting and sent them to Pat. I don't remember if I sent them to Mary yet or not, but Pat and Susan. And basically it goes over, it's kind of similar to the internal audit charter, but not really, because it focused more on the overall, like your charter, talking to Kevin, focuses on internal audit.
Right.
This is more of a broad-based, what the committee does as a whole, including like reviewing budgets, approving capital transactions, things of that nature. So we'll have that for review here soon. And then the only other issue is, I just got hot off the press today, our November financial statement, and we'll have this for the commission. I literally just got it right before I came in here. We're looking like we're around 5% below budget through 11 months, so we're doing really well, and I'll go over the details on that with you at the commission meeting, because I really haven't had time to review it that closely. And there is actually one other thing. I want to congratulate and thank some of our staff for all the effort they've put into the CARES Act process. We have been approved for some funds for Phase 1 CARES Act. I think it was around $500,000. So that was unanticipated dollars. We knew it was possible that we would get those funds. Primarily that's the hazard pay that's getting funded. But we've also got a big Phase 2 request that's in excess of $1 million that we don't have any feedback on yet. But I want to acknowledge Kelly Anderson, Nancy Rumbaugh, and Diane Welsh, and Andrea Hodges for their work on that project. And that's my report.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Chris. And thanks to all who worked really hard to secure that funding. I know it was probably a lot of work, so I appreciate that.
If you
yeah, I know. I'm glad I don't. You can work on that. All right. So the last item on the agenda is the Director of Internal Audit report. Kevin?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Like Chris, I got a couple quick things and we'll get y'all out of here. Just sort of wanted to give you an update on this is the time of year that we're getting our reports on agreed upon procedures reports in. So these are for providers, which would be the boards that have a state fiscal year. So it is the boards, and then we have 10 privates on a state fiscal year. So it's a total of 50 agreed upon reports we should have received. We have received 47. 2 had extensions, so we really only have 1 that is late. I will say what we have noticed as we're working through these, this directive changed fairly significantly this year. So we have, in just doing our preliminary reviews, we have 7 of those reports that we're having to send back to the CPA firm because it's fallen in the classification that I'm calling significant rework, like they need to reissue the report. In most of those cases, it's because they didn't read the directive and they followed the template from last year. They just pulled out their work papers and did what they did last year and didn't read the new directive. 3 of those had moderate revisions, meaning they may have to edit a page or 2. And then, of course, we'll have several that just have minor things that we'll need to follow up with them on. I also wanted to give you just sort of an update on our, as part of being not just audits, but trying to be proactive, we provide various types of training, sort of give you an update just for the first 6 months of this fiscal year, where we are on that. So we have the quarterly fiscal training, and I think probably most commissioners have participated in that at some point. But we have had 2 sessions, 67 attendees, orientation for new providers. We've had 4 of those and had about 20 participants. Auditor training, I know some of y'all have been in that recently because we had 2 just within the past few weeks. This is what we do in conjunction with Chris. The last 2 that we had were focusing, it's for the CPA firms, and it really was sort of focusing on the privates because most of those have a calendar year in. But those 2 sessions we had, it looks like 58 attendees. And we also do some training for providers, consumer funds, personal property, Medicaid fraud. We have done 3 of those this year, 270 attendees. We have one scheduled tomorrow as well. We've also done board training for one of our boards. So 421 folks that we've trained for the first 6 months. In the next day or 2, you'll receive, we were asked to do a verification of calculation for our room and board payments for one provider that had to redo their room and board rate. It included vehicle depreciation in there. We just completed that. You'll get that in the next day or 2. And then we have an exit this week where we have done an audit for DDSN looking at the procurement process and the procurement card process. And we'll be exiting with management this week on that. And again, once we get their response and all, it'll be the first of the year. We will get you that report and present it and see if you have any questions at that time. And I think that takes care of it for me.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Does anybody have any questions for Kevin regarding this or anything else outstanding? All right. Well, that concludes our agenda. If no one has any additional comments or questions, I can get someone to adjourn the meeting.
I'd just ask everybody to respond to the email that I sent out from a scheduling standpoint, please, for this week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, email, was it an email or text?
I sent an email out this morning.
Okay,
everybody.
okay, gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Great. Second. Okay. Great. We are adjourned. Thank y'all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.